There's lots of infertility related books out there, but is the trying game worth trying to read, or you better getting help elsewhere? Well, that depends. This book is not for everyone. I'm LauraM, IVF patient, fertility coach, and founder of embee Health. I've been on my own fertility journey and have gone through a growing list of procedures and tests. I don't have a baby yet, but my clinic and I have been trying for a while, so I recently read The Trying Game by Amy Klein. Klein is a journalist who documented her own infertility journey for the New York Times column Fertility Diary in 2014. Written after her successful treatments, this book is a casual, information-packed guide to the entire infertility journey. From trying to conceive on your own, to being in treatment, to eventually becoming pregnant. Now, she doesn't cover pregnancy, but she does talk about her child. Each chapter starts with a story from Klein's experience, and the chapters full of resources and footnotes also weaves in stories and quotes from patients and experts alike. It's like your nerdy friend when on a research binge, and they're filling you in over a long brunch. Now let's dig into what worked and what didn't so much in this book. Because this book feels like talking to your smart girlfriend, the writing is mostly casual and friendly throughout. The book is very accessible and easy to read. It's not just about explaining procedures or describing what happens in treatment. One of the best aspects of this book is how it touches on the emotional journey of being in treatment. We'll talk more on that a little later. As a heterosexual married person in her 40s, same as the author when she was writing, it was easy to see my own experience in her story. My repeated failures, the fear of running out of time, even considering experimental treatments. But the fertility patient population is way wider and more diverse than that. But she doesn't spend much time outside of her own bubble. Even in the chapters where she explores others in the waiting room, I couldn't help but picture these as heterosexual women who were just in treatment for different reasons. So if you're LGBTQ+, single by choice, or not white and upper middle class, this book will feel light. The book covers the entire fertility journey, from trying to conceive on your own with timed intercourse, to choosing a fertility clinic, to having treatments like IUI and IVF, to pregnancy loss, to donor conception, to surrogacy, to post-pregnancy success. Like, woo, that is a lot to cover. Now, I applaud her ambition, and I can understand why her publisher wanted her to maybe cover all those topics. As someone starting out wondering what might be involved, you get a decent tour here. But being so ambitious in 200 pages means you're either going to go light in areas, resort to footnotes, or just mention something in passing and move on, which unfortunately she had to do a lot. What was strange is the IVF chapter was kind of a mess. It conflated the multiple stages, making the process even more confusing. There's 3 stages to IVF. Egg stimulation and retrieval to get eggs, fertilization and embryo culture to grow embryos, and transfer to put that embryo back into the uterus to grow. It actually took me a minute to figure out what she was describing, and I've been through the whole process twice. Other sections felt like an afterthought. Chapter 4 alone covers egg freezing, trans healthcare, same-sex couples, and single parent by choice in like 20 pages. It's a whole chapter, which leads you to think that the journeys are related. But instead, I came out of the chapter kind of underwhelmed by the amount of detail and confused why they were all in the same chapter. I sort of wish she either covered it less and directed people elsewhere, or gave each topic their own chapter. For example, I know talking to patients who've used donors that there's a lot of kind of emotional and legal considerations to it, from donor anonymity to how you're going to talk to your child about the fact they were conceived by a donor. These sort of topics weren't touched on or covered at all. You could think of this book like the middle school class on infertility. But if you're looking for a high school class with more detail and nuance, this isn't where you'll find it. Starting out, I didn't know how much of this book would be memoir or magazine cover story or how-to guide. All I knew was that the author was a journalist, but I didn't know her writing or the blog that came before the book. You know, when she went through treatment, I was knee-deep in graduate school, barely sleeping, and not thinking about kids. But reading it now, dealing with my own infertility, I was shook. Klein really captures the emotional toll and weight of treatment. She talks about it in a real kind of snarky way that's true to the messiness of the feelings. Do we want to be happy for our pregnant friends? Sure. But do we also have jealous and mean thoughts? Yeah, absolutely. So if you've been trying for a while or found yourself in treatment, you're going to be in good company in the best parts of this book. Some chapters in particular did this incredibly well. So in chapter 5, I love how she tackled the guilt, blame, and emotional transition that comes with trying on your own to realizing you need to be in treatment. You know, there's this stress and grief you go through, knowing that your path isn't going to look like what you thought or what most other people do. She talks about it in a way that makes you feel less alone because she's heard and felt those things before. Chapter 17 is focused on one emotion, jealousy. The chapter starts with her sharing an anecdote where a friend called her to tell her about her pregnancy. And it describes Klein's reaction to the news. Other people's success brings a lot of mixed feelings when you have infertility. This chapter should be required reading for everyone because those 1 in 6 people dealing with infertility, they have lots of family and friends who could be more supportive and might not know what it's like to be in their shoes. It's also a good reminder to ourselves to give ourselves more self-compassion too, without taking out our frustrations on those around us. You know, well, infertility is a traumatic experience. You know, some of these thoughts and emotions around infertility are universal. So even though she doesn't cover all the journeys in her book, I think she does a good job of speaking to the feelings that can come from treatment. Now, all books should be well written. I shouldn't have to say this. But man, some books are a slog to get through. This is not that kind of book. As a professional writer, Klein knew all of the ways to communicate a point. Humor, tables, lists, metaphors, quotes. This makes the book interesting to read. You know, the best humor comes from things that have a little truth in them, right? And fertility treatment is like a laugh so you don't cry scenario. I have found myself in all sorts of situations that I never thought I'd be in because of treatment. As a to-do list person, I love checklists. Love them! And the finance list gave me some great ideas that I hadn't thought of before. And the miscarriage advice feels like another example of required reading for everyone about how to be supportive during such a difficult time. In chapter 15, she applied a theory from David Sedaris to infertility. Now, I don't know the original theory, but it's called the 4-burner theory. It's basically the idea that we can really only put our energy to 4 key things or areas in our lives. This idea was a really good reminder of the physical and mental energy being kind of output by that burner. And I've been trying to conceive for 3 years. It does take up a whole burner. And if I can really only put my core energy into 4 big areas of my life, then trying to conceive is definitely occupying one of those burners. Even though infertility and fertility treatment is taking up a whole burner in my life, that's okay because this is a priority. I found little insights like this kind of throughout the book that helped me get a new perspective on my treatment and just my infertility overall. IVF is a fast-moving field. I mean, heck, the first IVF baby ever is under 50. So any book on this topic is going to be sort of a treatment time capsule. You know, her treatment was from 2013 to 2015. And then she wrote the book in 2020. And then I read it in 2025. You know, I was pleasantly surprised how familiar the details were to my own treatment. But you have to know going in that some information is just incorrect or not quite how treatment is done now. So for example, she suggests that ICSI is required for PGT testing, and that PGT is really experimental, but neither one of those is true. So IVF is required for PGT. It's sort of in the name. You have to have an embryo outside of the body to be able to test it before putting it inside the body. Now, ICSI is a method of fertilization to create an embryo, whereas PGT is a way of sampling cells from the growing embryo several days later. Now, PGT has become really commonplace through clinic, but as of this recording, there's some really high-profile lawsuits against PGT testing providers. So who knows what we're going to learn and might change from that. In the chapter on persistence, there was an interview in quotes from someone who had had 20 egg retrievals. 20. Now, I got all the questions about how that happened, how it works, and how it was possible. Yeah, that's persistence, definitely. But it's also a privilege of time and money. Klein did acknowledge the role of money to continuing or pursuing treatment at all, but she just kind of left it at that. You know, I can't get free IVF in Israel. I don't have parents I can ask for money, nor would it ever be possible, money or time-wise, for me to have 20 egg retrievals. This chapter just kind of felt out of touch with my reality in treatment and what I've heard from other people. In chapter 21 on miscarriage, I think she could have provided more information, especially since it's so common, and she referred to the stats about how common it was and is. You know, I learned from my doctor that there are 4 common reasons for miscarriage, but she really only talked about one. You know, she also spent a lot of time talking about a particular procedure, the D&C, and how to collect genetic materials at home if you miscarry at home. Now, there are other ways to handle a miscarriage and to do genetic testing to find out the reason that miscarriage happened, or attempt to anyway. And so the result of how she described it is she made kind of a terrible situation even more scary and intimidating. If you're looking for up-to-date details, this book is not for you. So the book has some good and bad things going for it. You should definitely give it a read if you're looking for a broad overview and emotional support. This is great if you're just getting started with fertility treatment. When it comes to emotional support, if you want to know if you're crazy or want to find ways to describe what you're going through, Klein really represents that. But you should skip this book if you're looking for details about what to expect in treatment, or if you have specific treatment needs like understanding donors, or you have a diagnosis that you're kind of working with. You're just going to be confused and frustrated by the lack of depth. So that's my take on The Trying Game by Amy Klein. I'd love to hear from you in the comments. What did you think? Have you read the book? Did it help you? I'm also planning to make this a series, reviewing podcasts and books within the kind of fertility and fertility space. So let me know in the comments anything I should review next. Make sure to subscribe so you can catch future reviews and other videos. And like this video so it makes its way to other folks doing their own research. Today's fertility fun fact is all about preimplantation genetic testing, or PGT. That's when you take a sample of cells from a 5-day embryo to test the genetics of those cells, to sort of understand how healthy, quote unquote, the embryo is. Now, there are 3 types of tests. PGT for aneuploidy, or PGTA, looks at the number of chromosomes to figure out if there's more or less than there should be. PGT for monogenetic or single gene tests, commonly referred to as PGTM, those look for genetic markers of specific genetic diseases based on your personal genetics. PGT for structural rearrangements, or PGTS or PGTSR, that looks for 3 types of translocations, essentially when parts of the chromosomes actually break off and swap. Now, the thing to remember is these tests come with false positives and false negatives, and they don't guarantee that you're going to have a healthy or successful pregnancy. There are some pending lawsuits for PGT providers that should teach us a lot. So till next time, take care.